In the headlines, the Korean government announces a new policy package with the aim of seeking new growth points from partnerships with Middle Eastern countries. The Korean bourse reacts as the Fed sends an unexpectedly dovish message to markets, saying the U.S. economy still has issues. And the President of Tunisia declares a war on terrorism after an attack at one of his country's most famous museums leaves 21 people dead. Hello and welcome to ARIRANG News. Thanks for tuning in. Live from Seoul, I am Kang Chery. Korea is aiming to revitalize the economy by seeking a second Middle East boom. Following through with President Park Geun-hye's recent trip to this region, the government announced plans today to lay the groundwork for new business opportunities there. And that includes an increase in financial support for local builders. Kang Chery has the story.
Korea will funnel an extra 5 trillion won, or roughly $4.5 billion in funds to support local construction companies seeking to win orders from the Middle East. The announcement was made in a national trade and investment promotion meeting chaired by President Park Geun-hye on Thursday.
We will work to ensure the President's Middle East trip early this month produces tangible results, like improving the profitability of local builders, by increasing financial support for them and helping them find new markets within the Middle East.
On the back of the new measure, the government expects Korean companies will secure at least 70 billion in fresh orders this year and 80 billion in 2017. And to further boost efforts to ignite a so-called second Middle East boom to achieve growth, the government pledged to drastically cut regulations to lure investors in the resource-rich countries to Korea. It also said that it will continue to meet rising demand for halal foods, the global market for which is expected to grow to over $1.5 trillion in 2018, taking up almost 1/5 of the global food and beverage market. The government's drive to strengthen economic ties with the Middle East comes as Asia's fourth largest economy avidly looks for new growth engines. Experts say lots of business opportunities exist in the region as countries there try to build up their own economic and social infrastructures before their energy reserves dry up in the coming decades. Massive orders won by Korean companies in the 1970s and 80s created the first Middle East boom, laying the groundwork for Korea's economic growth. Pundits add that it's now important for the government to push the plans forward in a consistent manner and come up with detailed measures to ensure they produce results. Kang Chery, ARIRANG News.
And President Park Geun-hye is also looking at Korea's manufacturing and public safety industries as potential economy-boosting exports to the Middle East. In line with this, the government has presented plans to transform these sectors through so-called smart innovation. Choi Yoo-sun reports.
At Thursday's trade and investment meeting, President Park talked about revolutionizing the country's manufacturing sector. She said that for Korea to continue developing new growth engines overseas, it needs to come up with groundbreaking ways to bolster the competitiveness of the manufacturing industry and speed up the pace of innovation in the sector. Referring to how China and advanced economies have begun to threaten Korea's traditionally strong presence in the global auto and mobile markets, President Park said it's time for a full-fledged revolution of the smart industries. The government laid out a plan to speed up the president's so-called Manufacturing Innovation 3.0 initiative, including a $900 million project to transform 10,000 factories into smart factories by 2020. Smart factories apply state-of-the-art information and communications technology to the manufacturing process to maximize production and efficiency. The government and the private sector will spend another $900 million on research and development of 8 smart manufacturing technologies, including the Internet of Things, by 2017. Through these initiatives, the government expects Korea will record an export volume of $1 trillion in 2024 and rank 4th globally in terms of manufacturing exports. President Park then referred to growing concerns over natural disasters and cybersecurity in the Middle East, China, and the ASEAN region, adding that Korea needs to speed up efforts to dominate the global public safety market. In that regard, the government says it will invest $10 billion into fostering Korea's public safety industries and support Korean firms looking to launch related businesses in the Middle East and Southeast Asia. 최유선, 아리랑 뉴스.
We saw a pickup in Korea's producer prices in February for the first time in 7 months. The index serves as a leading indicator for consumer prices down the road. The Bank of Korea says producer prices edged up by 0.1% from the month before. The central bank attributes this pickup to a recent oil price rebound and a rise in fresh produce prices as the Lunar New Year holiday fell in February this year. The U.S. Federal Reserve has paved the way to raise its key interest rate, but made it clear that it will move forward with caution. The Fed has also cut its growth outlook on slowing spending, a drop in exports, and most importantly, low inflation. Song Ji-sun has the details.
As widely expected, the U.S. Federal Reserve opened the door for a possible rate hike sometime this year, removing the word patience from its policy statement. But Fed Chair Janet Yellen stressed the need for policymakers to consider the country's still fragile economic growth prospects.
Today's modification of our guidance should not be interpreted to mean that we have decided on the timing of that increase. In other words, just because we removed the word patient from the statement doesn't mean we're going to be impatient.
The U.S. Central Bank slashed both its growth outlook and inflation forecast for this year, saying inflation would move below its 2% target, largely due to falling energy prices and a decrease in spending. Yellen also noted that exports have weakened partly due to the strong dollar, but said that also reflects the strength of the U.S. economy. This hints that the Fed will not rush into a rate hike, as that will lead to a stronger dollar and dent its outbound shipments.
Because the Fed did what was expected, and at the same time, the markets are getting the message that, you know what, the Fed's not in a hurry to raise rates, and we're probably going to have these near zero interest rates for a few months longer than we thought.
Seoul Central Bank convened an emergency meeting Thursday morning to discuss the impact of the Fed's statement and prepare countermeasures. The market consensus is that the impact on Seoul will be limited, and fluctuations in the global financial market will be more contained, as the Fed stressed a more cautious approach in light of the impact of its stronger dollar. Song Ji-sun, ARIRANG News.
For the latest in news that impacts Korea and the world, join Kang Chery for a lively half hour that covers politics, business, international news, and much more. Live at 8 every weeknight on ARIRANG TV.
Human Rights Council headquarters in Geneva on Thursday, finding ways to persuade. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe will most likely visit the United States next month, but perhaps the biggest question about this trip is whether he will be granted permission to address the U.S. Congress. And ahead of that decision, there's mounting pressure on Prime Minister Abe to include an apology for Japan's wartime atrocities in this address. Kana Kim has the story.
The pressure on Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe to address the country's wartime atrocities in a prospective address to Congress will continue to mount, despite reports that lawmakers in Washington generally favor the idea. But House Speaker John Boehner, who has the sole authority on whether or not to invite Abe, has yet to make a decision on the matter. If Abe is allowed to give the address, some U.S. lawmakers are likely to demand that he devote a portion of his speech to apologizing for Japan's wartime atrocities. At the forefront of this movement is Representative Mike Honda, whose 2007 House resolution called on Japan to apologize for its wartime system of sex slavery. Honda said the opportunity to address Congress would be a high privilege for Abe and called on him to use the podium to acknowledge that Japan systematically kidnapped women and girls during war and apologize for its actions.
He may refer to the Kono statement But let's be real clear, Kono's statement was done by Deputy Secretary of the Cabinet. He is not the leader of the country.
The Kono statement, issued by then-Chief Cabinet Secretary Yohei Kono in 1993, contained an apology for Japan's sexual enslavement of women before and during the 1930s to mid-1940s. But with concerns Abe will use the speech to promote Japan as a peace-loving nation post-Second World War, many Korean-American organizations are campaigning against giving Abe such a high-profile stage. In 2006, former committee chairman Henry Hyde put a halt on then-Japanese Prime Minister Junichiro Koizumi's drive to address the Congress amid strong protests by civic groups. Connie Kim, ARIRANG News.
South Korea is looking for a way to reach a compromise with North Korea on the wage dispute at the inter-Korean Kaesong Industrial Complex. A Unification Ministry official in Seoul said Thursday that North Korea's unilateral decision last month to hike wages by more than 5% is not totally unacceptable, and that Seoul is seeking talks through the management committee for the jointly led complex. Previously, though, Seoul had said it was firmly against a pay raise and offered government-level discussions on the issue, which Pyongyang rejected. South and North Koreans use the same language, but decades of division and cultural changes in each country, or each Korea, have made it increasingly difficult for them to understand each other's dialects. It's a hurdle many North Korean defectors in South Korea have to overcome, but this smartphone application that we're about to show you might be able to help. Ji Myung-gil tells us more.
These young North Korean defectors are taking on a new language. They're learning to speak like a South Korean. Surprisingly, these students, and many like them, say one of the biggest problems they face is the language barrier.
It was like people were talking to me in a foreign language, so I was too embarrassed to ask my friends what the words meant. I felt alienated.
According to a 2012 study by the National Institute of the Korean Language, North Korean defectors understand only half of the language used in South Korea. To help them overcome these communication issues, Tay Worldwide teamed up with local nonprofits to develop a smartphone app called Univoca. It's a South Korean, North Korean translator and dictionary.
We realized late in the game that young North Korean defectors would have problems reading school textbooks and solving questions due to differences in culture and dialect.
This app will give North Korean students the courage and motivation to learn, as it also offers some privacy while they study.
Teachers hope the app will help bridge communication between South and North Korean students and make resettlement a little easier for defectors in the South. Ji Myung-gil, ARIRANG News.
The price of products at IKEA's Korea branch are the second highest after Sweden among 21 OECD member countries recently surveyed. The Consumers Union of Korea says of the 49 pieces of furniture included in the survey, roughly 90% of the products were more expensive than the average, and majority in the top 5. In its defense, IKEA Korea says it's unfortunate that the Consumers Union only looked at a tiny fraction of what IKEA has in stock in Korea and said the most of the products in the survey are items that are more popular in Europe than in Korea. With most people living in high-rise apartment buildings in Korea, interfloor noise causes many disputes between neighbors. But there's a new technology that could help reduce this annoyance. Kim Min-ji tells us more.
A noisy upstairs neighbor can cause a lot of stress, especially at night. The footsteps or other sounds that can be heard between floors are transmitted via low-frequency vibrations. Materials aimed at reducing the noise have been developed, and some apartment buildings have even tried filling the space between floors, but neither method has been very effective. Now researchers in Korea have developed a new technology that could take care of the problem. They have devised a new acoustic absorption structure with springs that reduces between-floor noise by absorbing low-frequency vibrations.
The theory here is that the device controls the vibrations and acts as a spring.
The device can reduce the transmission of noise between floors by up to 30%, and the installation cost is also 20% less than existing soundproofing methods. The researchers hope the device can be used not only to soundproof floors, but also in a wider range of fields.
The technology can be adapted to manufacture landing gear for planes or wind-powered electrical generators, basically anything that needs to counter big or fast vibrations.
The findings have been published in the March edition of the journal Transactions on Mechatronics. Kim Min-ji, ARIRANG News.
A shocking attack in Tunisia at one of the country's most famous museums. 21 people are dead, including the 2 gunmen who stormed the building. To tell us more, Paul E. is joining us. Paul, in the wake of all this violence, the president of Tunisia has declared that his country is at war with terrorism. Any indications linking this to extremist groups?
Well, no group yet has claimed responsibility, but the Tunisia's prime minister did reveal that one of the 2 gunmen was known to intelligence services, while both have now been formally identified. This as authorities say there could be 2 or 3 accomplices still at large. It's also been confirmed that 17 of the victims were foreign tourists hailing from Asia, Europe, and even South America. Arirang's Kwan So-ah has more.
What was supposed to be an enjoyable visit to the museum ended in a bloodbath. Tourists from Japan, Italy, France, Poland, Spain, and Colombia, 2 Tunisians and 1 police officer became victims of the terror attack Wednesday at the popular Bardo Museum in Tunisia's capital, Tunis. More than 40 people were injured.
It was a difficult experience. I love Tunisia. I come very often to Hammamet. I thank the soldiers for protecting us.
Authorities killed 2 gunmen but are searching for at least 2 more. The attackers were dressed in military uniforms and began shooting towards tourists getting out of buses and took hostages.
It's a hard blow for Tunisia, but we want all our friends to understand that terrorism can strike everywhere at any place. So terrorism strikes, we strike again, but won't have any future. We have to be united in the fight against terrorism.
The incident occurred at a moment when the Tunisian parliament, located very close to the museum, was discussing an anti-terror law. It's not yet known who was behind the attack or what their motive was. But suspicions have naturally fallen on the extremist group that calls itself Islamic State. Authorities estimate that about 3,000 Tunisians have joined fighters in Iraq and Syria in recent years. Tunisia's prime minister said the attack was designed to destroy the nation's economy as it is largely reliant on tourism. The country has been seen by many as the only success story of the pro-democracy Arab Spring movement, but it has been struggling to make much economic progress. The incident was immediately condemned by international leaders, with many calling it a deplorable and cowardly attack. Kwan So-ah, ARIRANG News.
And following up on Israel's recent general election, the official results have been released, by the way, confirming victory for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. And this as the U.S. has broken its silence on the results of the vote. What did Washington have to say?
Well, the White House has sent a warning of sorts to Netanyahu, who is now on course to be Israel's longest-serving leader. It stated that it was deeply concerned about how his party is allegedly marginalizing the Israeli Arab minority. The remark also represents a widening rift between the U.S. and Israel over Palestinian statehood. Our Son Jong-en has more.
The surprise victory has stoked concern in the international community. The White House, which had remained silent since the election, gave its first public response on Netanyahu's triumph Wednesday, saying a new rift has opened between U.S. and Israeli leaders. White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest said Washington would have to reevaluate its position on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in the region, saying that it has been the U.S.'s policy for more than 20 years to seek a two-state solution in resolving the issue. His comments came after Netanyahu had promised in the final hours of campaigning not to allow the creation of a Palestinian state while he is in power. After the victory, Netanyahu's Likud party said it would work quickly to form a new coalition government within 2 to 3 weeks. Ernest added that the White House was deeply concerned that the Likud party was seeking to marginalize Israel's minority Arab citizens. On the election day, Netanyahu had issued a warning in a Facebook message to voters in his party that left-leaning parties were on the brink of toppling the Israeli government by busing Arab Israeli voters to the polls, saying that the Arab voters are coming out in droves. While Secretary of State John Kerry has called Netanyahu to congratulate him on the victory, President Barack Obama has yet to reach out to him. Son Jung-in, ARIRANG News.
And shifting to Singapore now, one of the country's most respected leaders, Lee Kuan Yew, remains in critical condition in hospital. This as Singaporeans, young and old alike, are closely watching his health conditions. Do tell us more about this man.
Well, Lee Kuan Yew served as Singapore's first prime minister. He's considered to be an iconic political figure in Asia, as he's widely credited with transforming the city-state into a global financial powerhouse. A statement released by the government on Thursday said that Lee was critically ill and remained under observation in an intensive care unit. The 91-year-old had been receiving treatment for severe pneumonia since early February. Though Lee has moved out of the public view, he is still regarded as an influential figure in the current government.
And shifting gears now to the coffee industry, Paul, Starbucks has announced that it's launching a delivery service in the second half of this year. I have to tell you, I, for one, cannot start my day without a cup of Joe. So when and where can I place my first order?
Well, I'm sorry to say you're going to have to wait a little longer for this service to hit Korea. Starbucks Chief Digital Officer Adam Brotman said this trial run will be limited to just 2 regions. One will be the city of Seattle, where the coffee chain giant is headquartered. Starbucks said it will be partnering up with a delivery startup company, Postmates, to transport customized drinks and pastries via its own smartphone app. The second test hub will be the Empire State Building in New York City. The average time for deliveries is expected to take 30 minutes or less.
And finally, the latest piece of tech news today. Apple is reportedly set to launch its first online TV service as early as this September, according to the Wall Street Journal. So how much of a hype is surrounding this reported launch, Paul?
Oh, tremendous. It's off the charts. There's been talk of Apple moving into TVs for years. Rumors have circulated of the company releasing an actual television set, and this latest tip-off seems to be a logical step in that direction. The Journal said this week Apple is currently in talks with major broadcasters such as ABC, Fox, ESPN, and even Disney on the plan. The cost of entry for consumers will be about $30 to $40 a month. That will give users about 25 channels which they can view across iOS devices, from iPhones to Apple's own TV set-top box. No official word yet from Apple, but the launch date does coincide with its annual keynote event. Chery?
All right, Paul, thank you so much for those stories, but we will see you again in just about 2 hours. Hello and welcome. I'm Kim Bo-kyung with your weather forecast. So hope you got to spend some time outdoors today as we got to enjoy fabulous spring-like conditions. In fact, the daytime high here in the capital rose up to 21 degrees, which is the highest in 34 years. At the moment, we are under clear skies nationwide, but light clouds will move in down south. And so good news that this wonderful weather will continue tomorrow with numbers peaking above seasonal averages in most regions, but do keep in mind that those of you in the inland areas could wake up to foggy conditions, so please be careful behind the wheel. On to tomorrow's readings. The daytime high here in the capital hits 22, Daegu 21, Busan 17. Meanwhile, Jeju reaches up to 16, Dokdo 11, Mount Kumgang hits 9. Those are the updates I have for you now. I'll see you soon. Thank you very much, and that will do it for this edition of ARIRANG News. Thanks for watching.